The alarm screamed through the corridors of the Taiwan's Pride, and Hana ran faster than she had ever run in her life. Red emergency lights flashed above her head, turning everything into a nightmare of shadows and blood-colored walls. Her boots slammed against the metal floor as she raced toward the nursery section. She had been in the laboratory when the hull breach happened. One moment she was studying samples under the microscope, and the next moment, the entire ship shook like a toy in an angry child's hand. Something had hit them. Maybe space debris. Maybe a small meteor. It didn't matter what it was. What mattered was that the ship was bleeding air into space, and the emergency systems were sealing off sections to save everyone inside. Hannah turned the corner and saw the nursery door still open. Thank God. She burst through and immediately heard the frightened sounds of the cubs. 3 young Vreshka huddled in the corner, their scales rippling with colors that showed fear. Blue and purple waves moved across their bodies like ocean currents. Their eyes, huge and golden, locked onto her. It's okay, Hana said, keeping her voice soft even though her heart hammered in her chest. We need to go to the safe room. Come on, babies. The cubs knew her. She had spent 2 years earning their trust, sitting with them for hours, learning their sounds and movements. The smallest one, Tala, chirped and ran to her first. The cub's head barely reached Hana's waist. Tala pressed against her leg, and Hana felt the rapid beating of the cub's heart through her scales. That's my girl, Hana whispered. She looked at the other 2. Rax, Vin. Come on. We don't have much time. Rax, the oldest and biggest, moved toward her slowly. He was always the cautious one, always thinking before acting. Vin liked to act tough, but Hana knew he was scared too. She could see it in the way his tail curled tight against his body. The alarm changed its tone, becoming more urgent. That meant they had less than 2 minutes before the emergency doors would seal automatically. Hana grabbed her thermal blanket from the bench where she had left it earlier. The blanket was standard emergency equipment. Thin but incredibly warm. It could keep a human alive in freezing temperatures for hours. Into the den, quickly. Hana herded the cubs toward the reinforced safe room at the back of the nursery. The den was built to protect the cubs from any disaster. Its walls were thick metal, and it had its own air supply and heating system. Once inside, they would be safe until the repair teams fixed the breach. The cubs scrambled into the den, their claws clicking on the floor. Hana was right behind them when she heard the roar. Krelva, the cub's mother, appeared in the nursery doorway. The adult Vreshka was massive, easily 3 times Hana's size. Her scales were deep red and black, and her eyes blazed with protective fury. When she saw Hana near her cubs, something primitive and violent flashed across her face. Wait, Hana raised her hands. I was just getting them to safety. But Krelva wasn't listening. Or maybe she couldn't listen. Maybe her instincts were too strong, screaming that this small human was a threat to her babies. The Vreshka mother lunged forward, and Hana stumbled backward out of the den doorway. Krelva? Please? Hana tried again, but the Vreshka had already reached the den controls. The heavy door began to slide shut. Hana saw the cubs inside, safe and protected. She saw her thermal blanket lying on the floor where she had dropped it when Krelva appeared. And then she saw Krelva's eyes, filled with something that looked almost like regret, but not quite like apology. The door sealed with a heavy thunk that Hana felt in her bones. She stood in the nursery, alone. The temperature was already dropping. She could see her breath starting to fog in the air. The hull breach had damaged the environmental systems in this section. Without heat, without a proper suit. Hana pressed her hand against the viewport in the den door. Through the thick, transparent material, she could see the cubs. They had noticed the blanket. Tala approached it first, sniffing the synthetic fabric with her sensitive nose. It carried her scent from all the times she had wrapped it around herself during long observation sessions. Rax came closer too, batting at the blanket with one paw. For a moment, Hana thought they were just playing with it, the way young ones play with anything new and interesting. But then Tala grabbed a corner of the blanket in her small jaws and began pulling it toward the door, pulling it toward Hana. "No, baby, you keep it," Hana whispered, even though they couldn't hear her. Her teeth were starting to chatter. "Stay warm. I'll figure something out." But she didn't know what she could figure out. The corridor outside the nursery was damaged. She had seen the torn metal and the ice crystals forming on the walls when she ran past it. If she left the nursery, she would freeze even faster. Her only chance was to stay here and hope someone came before hypothermia took her. She watched the cubs through the viewport. Tala was still pulling the blanket, making distressed chirping sounds. Vin had joined her now, pushing the blanket with his nose. Even Rax, always so dignified, was trying to help. They were dragging the blanket across the floor of the den, inch by inch, toward the sealed door. Toward her, Hana felt something break open in her chest. They understood. Somehow, these young creatures who were supposed to see her as prey or competition understood that she was in danger. They were trying to give back the warmth she had shown them. Her legs were getting weak. She slid down to sit on the floor, her back against the cold wall beside the viewport. She could barely feel her fingers anymore. The red emergency lights seemed dimmer now, or maybe that was just her vision failing. Through the viewport, Tala pressed her face against the glass from the inside, still holding the blanket in her mouth. The cub's golden eyes met Hana's brown ones. "It's okay, little one," Hana said softly. "You tried. That's more than I ever expected." She closed her eyes, trying to conserve energy, trying to stay conscious. She didn't know if anyone would come in time. She didn't know if Krelva would change her mind. All she knew was that 3 predator cubs were trying desperately to save her life with a blanket they couldn't even push through a sealed door. And somehow, in her fading consciousness, that felt like the most important thing that had ever happened. The cold was eating Hana alive from the outside in. She could feel it in her toes first, then her fingers, then creeping up her arms and legs like invisible insects made of ice. She tried to keep her eyes open, but each blink lasted longer than the one before. Her body wanted to sleep. It wanted to give up and drift away into the peaceful darkness that whispered at the edges of her mind. But something kept pulling her back. A sound, high-pitched and desperate, chirping. Hana forced her eyes open and looked at the viewport. Tala was crying. Not playing. Not making the curious sounds cubs make when they explore new things. The little Vreshka was genuinely crying, her body shaking with distress. She had dropped the blanket and was scratching at the door now, her small claws scraping uselessly against the metal. Rax had stopped batting at the blanket too. He stood next to his sister, pushing his nose against the door seal as if he could force it open through willpower alone. Even Vin, who usually acted like nothing bothered him, had flattened his body against the floor in a position that Hana recognized. It was submission, worry, fear, the same position the cubs took when they thought they had done something wrong and were waiting for punishment. They knew she was dying. These young creatures who barely understood their own language somehow knew that the human on the other side of the door wouldn't last much longer. In the command center, 3 levels above, Krelva stood before the monitoring screens with her claws clenched. The ship's medical sensors displayed life signs for everyone aboard. Most of the readings glowed steady green. A few showed yellow for minor injuries. And one reading pulsed red, getting dimmer with each passing second. Hana's reading. "Her core temperature is dropping fast," said Bora, the human engineer who stood beside Krelva. Bora's voice was tight with controlled anger. "She has maybe 10 minutes left. Maybe less." Krelva's tail lashed behind her. "The protocol is clear. During a breach emergency, the cubs must be sealed in the den until the danger passes. Opening the door puts them at risk." She was trying to save them. Another human voice, sharp and accusing. Day pushed his way past 2 Vreshka crew members to stand in front of Krelva. His face was red, and his hands were shaking. "Hana got your cubs to safety. She made sure they were protected. And you locked her out to die." "I acted on instinct," Krelva said. but her voice had something in it that wasn't there before. Doubt. I saw a potential threat near my young. I responded as any Vreshka would. Hana is not a threat. Day's voice cracked. She spent 2 years with those cubs. She sings to them when they can't sleep. She shares her food with them. She held Rax for 3 hours when he was sick with fever. Even though he could have bitten her head off with one snap. She loves those cubs like they're her own. Krelva turned away from him and looked at the security footage playing on one of the screens. She had been reviewing the recordings from the nursery over the past months. There was Hana, sitting on the floor while the cubs climbed over her like she was a piece of furniture. There was Hana, carefully treating a cut on Tala's paw. There was Hana, laughing as Vin stole her datapad and refused to give it back. And there, from 6 months ago, was footage Krelva had almost forgotten. A power surge had caused a small explosion in the nursery. In the chaos, a heavy storage container had fallen, and Vin had been right underneath it. Hana had thrown herself forward, catching the container on her back and shoulder. The impact had cracked 2 of her ribs. But Vin had been safe. Hana had taken an injury to protect a Vreshka cub. "Show me the den cameras," Krelva said quietly. Her voice had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by something that might have been fear. Bora pulled up the live feed from inside the den. All 3 cubs were at the door now. Tala was still crying, her small body shaking with each chirp. Rax had picked up the blanket again and was pushing it against the door seal, over and over, as if hoping that this time it would somehow go through the solid metal. Vin was digging at the base of the door so frantically that his claws left small scratches in the reinforced floor. "They have never acted like this," Krelva said. She moved closer to the screen, her golden eyes fixed on her children. Even during the storm last year, when the turbulence was so bad that adults were getting sick, they stayed calm. But now they're trying to save her, Bora said simply, the same way she would try to save them. Krelva's claws flexed. 2 years of observation crashed against millions of years of instinct in her mind. Every ancestor, every story, every lesson of her people said that other species were dangerous to cubs. You never let strangers near the young. You never trusted anyone outside your own pack. You protected your children above all else, even if it meant killing. But her cubs were telling her something different. They were screaming it. Actually, Tala's cries echoed through the den's audio feed. The sound cut into Krelva's heart like a blade. "How long does she have?" Krelva asked. Bora checked the readings. 7 minutes. Maybe 8 if she's strong. And if I open the den, she lives. If we get her inside fast enough, the cub's body heat alone could stabilize her. Until medical teams arrive. Fiverman time. Without redder. 231. With time 5. With preforman time. With proverman time. With preforman time. And if the breach gets worse? If the environmental systems fail completely? Bora's jaw tightened. Then we all die together. But at least we die knowing we tried to save someone who deserved it. Krelva looked at the screen again. On the nursery camera, Hana had slumped against the wall beside the viewport. Her eyes were closed. Her lips were blue. Ice crystals were forming in her hair and on her eyelashes. She looked like a statue, frozen in place, but her chest still moved. Barely. Each breath was shallow and slow, but she was still breathing. And then Hana's eyes opened, just a crack. She looked at the viewport, at the cubs on the other side. Her lips moved, and though there was no audio from her side, Krelva could see what she was saying. The same words she said every night when she left the nursery. The same words she had been saying for 2 years. "Good night, little ones. Sleep safe." Then Hana began to sing. Her voice was so quiet that the audio sensors barely picked it up. But the cubs heard it. Tala's crying softened. Rax's ears perked up. Even Vin stopped his frantic digging. It was the lullaby. The one Hana sang during the engine turbulence. A simple human melody with no words, just soft sounds that somehow crossed the barrier between species. The cubs loved it. It calmed them when nothing else could. And now, freezing to death, locked out and betrayed, Hana was still trying to comfort them. Something broke inside Krelva. Not her body, but something deeper. Something in the place where instinct lived and ruled. The break felt like pain, but also like freedom. "Prepare medical teams," Krelva said, turning away from the screens. "And get me to that nursery. Now." Day and Bora exchanged glances. "You're going to open the den?" Day asked. Krelva was already moving toward the door, her powerful body flowing through the command center. "My cubs have made their choice," she said. "They want her in the pack. Who am I to refuse them?" After, she ran through the corridors, her claws tearing gouges in the floor with each stride. Behind her, Bora and Day scrambled to keep up, and medical teams grabbed their equipment and followed. The ship's alarm still wailed, but Krelva barely heard them. All she could hear was Tala crying. All she could see was Hana's blue lips. All she could think was that she might already be too late. Krelva reached the nursery in less than a minute. Her lungs burned from the sprint, but she didn't slow down. The door slid open at her approach, and the cold hit her like a physical blow. The temperature in the nursery had dropped to barely above freezing. Her breath came out in white clouds. She saw Hana immediately. The human was still propped against the wall beside the den's viewport, but she wasn't moving anymore. Her eyes were closed. Ice covered her hair and clothes. For one terrible moment, Krelva thought she was too late. Then she saw the slight rise and fall of Hana's chest. Still breathing, still alive. Barely. Krelva's claws reached for the den's control panel, then stopped. Every instinct in her body screamed warnings. The cubs were safe inside. The air in the den was warm and clean. Once she opened that door, cold air would rush in. The cubs would be exposed to the same danger that was killing Hana. And there was something else. Something deeper and more frightening than physical danger. If she opened this door, she would be breaking the most sacred law of her people. She would be choosing an outsider over the safety protocols designed to protect Vreshka young. Her own people would judge her. They might exile her. They might do worse. Her claw hovered over the release button. "Mom, please." Day's voice came from behind her. He had caught up, breathing hard. "You have to open it. You don't understand what this means," Krelva said without turning around. "If I do this, if I choose wrong, my cubs could die. I could lose everything. You'll lose Hana if you don't." Day moved to stand beside her. He was so much smaller than Krelva, barely reaching her shoulder, but there was no fear in him. "And look at your cubs. Really look at them." Krelva turned her eyes to the viewport. Inside the den, all 3 cubs were pressed against the glass. Their claws scratched at it uselessly. Tala's crying had become continuous, a sound of pure anguish. Rax had the blanket in his mouth again, pulling it, pushing it, trying with every bit of strength in his young body to get it through the sealed door to Hana. And Vin, aggressive Vin, who trusted no one, had brought his favorite sleeping cushion to the door. He pushed it against the seal, trying to give it to Hana, his most precious possession, the thing he guarded from his own siblings. He wanted Hana to have it. "They're trying to save her," Day said softly. "Because she saved them first. She's always saved them, and they know it." Bora arrived then, carrying a bundle of equipment. "Wait," she called out. "We might have another way," she explained quickly while setting up a small device beside the den door. The ventilation system in the den had a small access port, originally designed for maintenance. It was barely large enough to pass food containers through. But it might, just might, be large enough for the blanket. "If the cubs can push it through this port," Bora said, working frantically to override the safety locks, "Hana can get it without us opening the main door. It buys us time to think of a better solution." There is no better solution, Krelva said, but she didn't stop Bora from working. 5 minutes, Day said, checking his communication device. But Hana doesn't have 5 minutes. Bora got the access port open. It was a small, square opening, about the size of a human head. Okay, she said. Now we just need the cubs to understand what to do. They all looked at Hana. She was the one who could communicate with the cubs. She was the one they listened to. But Hana wasn't moving. Her skin had gone from blue to gray. Her breathing was so shallow that Krelva's sensitive eyes could barely detect it. Hana! Day dropped to his knees beside her. He grabbed her shoulders gently, trying not to damage her frozen skin. Hana, wake up. We need you. Nothing. No response. No movement. Day looked up at Krelva with desperate eyes. Do something. You're their mother. Make them understand. Krelva approached the viewport. She had never tried to give her cubs commands through the glass before. They were inside, safe, and she was outside. It went against everything natural, but she placed her claw against the glass and made the low rumbling sound that meant attention, focus, listen. All 3 cubs turned to look at her. Even in their distress, they responded to their mother's voice. Krelva pointed at the blanket, then at the small open port in the wall. She repeated the gesture. Point at blanket. Point at port. Again and again. Rax's head tilted. He was thinking, trying to understand. He looked at the blanket in his mouth, then at the port, then at his mother, then at Hana. Through the viewport, understanding flashed in his golden eyes. He dragged the blanket toward the port, and his siblings followed instantly. Together, the 3 cubs pushed and pulled the blanket toward the small opening. It was awkward. The blanket was big and the port was small. But they didn't give up. Come on, Bora whispered. Come on, babies. You can do it. Tala grabbed one corner and pushed it into the port opening. It went in a few inches, then caught on something. Rax bit another corner and pulled from a different angle. The blanket folded, narrowed, and slid deeper into the port. Krelva could see it moving through the ventilation system. Centimeter by centimeter, pushed by small jaws and smaller paws, the blanket worked its way through the narrow passage. I see it. Day reached into the port from the outside. His fingers brushed the edge of the blanket. He pulled. Gently at first, then harder. The blanket slid free, and Day grabbed it with both hands. He wrapped it around Hana immediately, covering her from shoulders to feet in the thermal material. The blanket was designed to reflect and trap body heat. Within seconds, it would start warming her. The question was whether seconds would be enough. Hana, Day said, rubbing her arms through the blanket, trying to generate friction and warmth. Stay with us. Please stay with us. Krelva watched through the viewport as her cubs pressed against the glass. They could see that the blanket had reached Hana. Tala's crying had stopped, replaced by hopeful chirping. Rax's tail moved in small, anxious swishes. Even Vin had stopped his frantic digging and was watching with intense focus. They were waiting to see if their gift had been enough. But inside the den, the air was getting colder. The open access port had let some of the warmth escape. Krelva could see frost starting to form on the inside of the viewport. The cubs were young, still growing. They couldn't handle extreme cold, as well as adults could. In trying to save Hana, they were now risking themselves. Krelva looked at the control panel, at the emergency release button, at the seal that kept her babies safe and Hana dying. She thought about laws and instincts and protocols. She thought about what her ancestors would say. She thought about her duty as a mother, and her responsibility as a Vreshka. Then she thought about Hana singing lullabies in the dark, Hana taking an injury to save Vin, Hana spending hours teaching cubs who weren't even her species, Hana freezing to death while trying to comfort the children who loved her. And she thought about her own cubs, choosing to save Hana even when it meant giving up their warmth, their comfort, their most precious possessions. They had already decided. They had already chosen Hana as pack. Krelva's claw touched the emergency release button. "Get ready," she said to Day and Bora. "When this door opens, you have about 30 seconds to get her inside before I have to seal it again." "Understood?" They both nodded. Krelva took a deep breath. She pressed the button. The den door began to slide open with a hiss of equalizing air pressure. The moment there was space enough, Day and Bora grabbed Hana. They lifted her between them and rushed through the opening. Krelva followed immediately, her body blocking the cold air from rushing in too fast. The cubs swarmed Hana the instant she was inside. They pressed their warm bodies against her, covering her with their bulk and their heat. Tala curled against Hana's chest. Rax lay across her legs. Vin pushed himself against her back. They were giving her their warmth. Everything they had, they gave to save her. Krelva sealed the door behind them. The medical teams could wait outside. Right now, in this moment, there was only Pack. And Hana was Pack. The warmth came back slowly, like sunlight through morning fog. Hana felt it first in her chest, where something heavy and warm pressed against her. Then, in her legs, wrapped in heat that pulsed with steady breathing. Then across her back, where another warm weight pinned her gently to the floor. She tried to open her eyes, but they felt frozen shut. Her whole body felt frozen. Actually, frozen and heavy and distant, like it belonged to someone else. Then she heard the purring, deep and rumbling, coming from 3 different sources around her. The sound vibrated through her bones. Cubs. The cubs were purring. Memory flooded back. The alarm. The hull breach. Krelva's face as she sealed the door. The cold. The terrible, killing cold. Hana forced her eyes open. Everything was blurry at first, but shapes slowly came into focus. She was lying on the floor of the den, wrapped in her thermal blanket. Tala's small face was inches from her own. The cub's breath warm against Hana's cheek. Rax's heavier weight covered her legs, and she could feel Vin's presence at her back. They had piled on top of her like a living blanket. Their body heat, combined with the thermal covering, was bringing her core temperature back up. "Don't move too fast." Day's voice came from somewhere above her. "You were almost gone. Your heart rate dropped so low, we thought we'd lost you." Hana turned her head slightly and saw Day and Bora sitting nearby. And beyond them, Krelva. The massive Vreshka sat with her back against the den wall, watching her cubs and the human they had claimed. "You opened the door," Hana said. Her voice came out as a whisper, rough and painful. "You let me in. I had no choice," Krelva said. Her voice was strange, softer than Hana had ever heard it. "My cubs made their decision. They chose you." Tala chirped and nuzzled closer to Hana's face. The small cub's golden eyes were full of relief and happiness. She licked Hana's cheek with her rough tongue, the Vreshka equivalent of a kiss. "Hey, little one," Hana whispered, lifting one hand to stroke Tala's head. Her fingers still felt numb and clumsy, but they worked. "Thank you for saving me." The next 3 days passed in a blur of medical treatments and sleep. The ship's doctors checked Hana constantly, monitoring for frostbite damage and hypothermia complications. She had been incredibly lucky. A few more minutes in that cold would have caused permanent damage or death. As it was, she would recover completely. The cubs refused to leave her side. They slept in her medical bay, curled up on blankets beside her recovery bed. When nurses came to check on Hana, the cubs would wake immediately, watching with protective intensity. If anyone approached too quickly or made Hana uncomfortable, all 3 cubs would growl. It was a small sound, not truly threatening yet, but the promise of what those growls would become was clear. "They've claimed you," the Vreshka doctor said one morning, while examining Hana's hands for nerve damage. "Pack cubs. Protect pack members. They see you as family now." "True. I see them as family too," Hana said. watching Rax sleep at the foot of her bed. I always have, but while Hana recovered, trouble was growing. Word of what Krelva had done spread quickly through the Vreshka community on the ship. She had violated sacred protocols. She had opened the den during an emergency. She had chosen a human over the absolute safety of her own cubs. On the 5th day of Hana's recovery, 3 Vreshka elders arrived from the command council. They demanded a formal investigation. They demanded to see Krelva. They demanded answers. Hana heard about the meeting from Day, who visited her medical bay that evening. He looked worried, which made Hana worried too. "They're talking about exile," Day said quietly, glancing at the cubs to make sure they were asleep. "The elders say Krelva broke the most important law. They say she put her cubs in danger for an outsider. They say other Vreshka will see this as permission to ignore safety protocols. But the cubs are fine." Hana pushed herself up in bed, ignoring the protest from her still healing body. "They're healthy and safe. Nothing bad happened. That's not the point to them," Day said. "The point is that something bad could have happened. The risk alone is enough to punish her." Hana felt sick, and it had nothing to do with her recent near-death experience. Krelva had saved her life. The cubs had saved her life. And now, Krelva might lose everything because of it. "I need to testify," Hana said. "I need to tell them what really happened." "You will. The hearing is tomorrow." "But Hana," Day hesitated. "The elders are very traditional. They don't understand bonds between species. They might not care about what you have to say." That night, Hana couldn't sleep. She lay in her medical bay bed, staring at the ceiling, while the cubs snored softly around her. Tala was pressed against her side, as always. The small cub had barely left contact with Hana since the rescue. Hana thought about the moment when she was dying in the cold. She remembered seeing the cubs try to push the blanket through the door. She remembered their distress, their determination, their love. They hadn't thought about protocols or laws or what was proper. They had only thought about saving someone they cared about. Wasn't that what family meant? Wasn't that what pack meant? The hearing took place in the ship's main conference room. Krelva stood before a panel of 3 Vreshka elders, her posture straight but her eyes downcast. It was a position of submission, acknowledging the authority of those who judged her. The chief elder, an ancient Vreshka named Tor with scales so dark they were almost black, spoke in the formal language of their people. Bora translated quietly for the humans present. "You opened a protected den during an active emergency," Tor said. "You exposed cubs to danger for the sake of an outsider. This is forbidden. This has always been forbidden. What defense do you offer?" Krelva was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "I offer no defense of my actions based on our laws. By our laws, I acted incorrectly. I accept this." Murmurs ran through the gathered Vreshka. Hana, sitting in the back with Day and other human crew members, felt her heart sink. If Krelva wouldn't defend herself, who would? Then Tor said, "However, before we pass judgment, there are others who have requested to speak. We will hear them." The first to speak was the ship's engineer, a Vreshka named Mach. He brought forward data logs and security footage. The human, Hana, had clearance to evacuate the nursery corridor during the emergency, Mach said. She could have left immediately and reached safety. Instead, she stayed to ensure the cubs reached the den first. She chose to risk her life for Vreshka Young. The elders studied the footage in silence. They watched Hana herding the cubs, watched her make sure each one was safe before thinking of herself. Next came the medical officer, who presented Hana's records. "This human has taken injury, protecting Vreshka cubs on 3 separate occasions," the officer said. "Broken ribs, torn shoulder muscles, chemical burns. Each time, she placed herself between danger and the young. Each time, she asked for no recognition or reward." More footage played. More evidence of Hana's actions over 2 years. Then something unexpected happened. The cubs themselves were brought into the hearing chamber. Tala, Rax, and Vin walked in beside a handler. But the moment they saw Hana, they broke away and ran to her. They climbed into her lap, onto her shoulders, pressing against her with happy chirps. And when the handler tried to lead them away from Hana, all 3 cubs growled. It wasn't a playful sound. It was a warning. It was the sound of young ones protecting their pack. Tor's eyes widened. The other elders leaned forward in their seats. The cubs have bonded with the human, one elder whispered. True pack bond. I have never seen this with another species. Neither have I, said another. And look at their behavior. They guard her. They show no fear of her. They treat her as a pack elder. Tor was silent for a long time, watching the cubs with Hana. Then he said, Bring the human forward. I would hear from her directly. I nay. Hana stood, gently moving the cubs aside. Her legs still felt weak, but she walked to stand beside Krelva. Up close, she could see that Krelva's claws were shaking slightly. Hana reached out and placed her hand on Krelva's arm. The gesture was small, but its meaning was clear. I stand with you. Krelva looked down at her, and something in her eyes shifted. Tor studied Hana with eyes that held the weight of many decades. His gaze was not unkind, but it was intense, evaluating, judging. Hana met his eyes without flinching. She had faced death in the cold. She could face judgment here. You are the human called Hana, Tor said. It wasn't a question. But Hana nodded anyway. Tell me, why did you stay with the cubs when you could have fled to safety? Because they needed someone, Hana said simply. They were scared. The alarm was loud, and they didn't understand what was happening. I couldn't leave them alone with that fear. But they are not your species. They are not your responsibility. They're children, Hana said. That makes them everyone's responsibility, another elder spoke up, a female with silver-streaked scales. Do you understand that Krelva could have left you to die? That by our laws, she should have left you to die? I understand that now, Hana said. In the moment, I hoped she would change her mind. But I understood her fear too. She saw a potential threat near her babies. She reacted to protect them. I don't blame her for that. You don't blame her? The silver-scaled elder seemed surprised. She locked you outside to freeze. She chose her cubs over your life. Yes, Hana said. And that's exactly what a good mother should do. She protected her children first. I would have done the same thing. Silence filled the chamber. The elders exchanged glances. Then Tor said, But she changed her mind. She opened the den. She chose to risk her cubs to save you. Do you understand how unprecedented this is? How it violates everything we teach our young? Hana looked at Krelva, then back at Tor. I think she didn't choose me over her cubs, Hana said slowly, working through the thought as she spoke. I think she chose to listen to her cubs. They were trying to save me. They were crying and scratching and pushing the blanket through that port. They made their choice first. Krelva respected that choice. Cubs do not make choices about pack membership, Tor said firmly. Adults decide. Adults protect. That is our way. Then maybe your way missed something important, Hana said. She heard gasps from some of the Vreshka in the chamber. But she continued. Maybe cubs understand things that adults forget. They don't see species or threat categories. They see individuals. They see actions. They judge based on what someone does, not what someone is. Hana gestured to where the 3 cubs sat, watching the proceedings with worried eyes. Tala, Rax, and Vin spent 2 years learning who I am. They learned that I would feed them when they were hungry, comfort them when they were scared, play with them when they were bored, and protect them when they were in danger. They learned I would take injury to keep them safe. And when they saw me dying, They tried to save me with everything they had. Not because I'm human. Not because of some law or protocol. But because I'm theirs and they're mine. Tala chirped at the sound of her name. Without permission, she trotted over to Hana and pressed against her legs. Rax and Vin followed immediately, taking positions on either side of Hana like guards. Look at them, Hana said softly. They've made their choice. I'm packed to them, and they're packed to me. Krelva didn't break your laws by ignoring her cubs' safety. She honored a deeper law by listening to what her cubs were telling her. Tor stood slowly, his old bones creaking. He walked down from the elder's platform and approached Hana. Up close, he was even more imposing, easily twice her height, and many times her weight. But Hana held her ground, one hand resting on Tala's head. Tor reached out one claw and gently touched the cubs. First Tala, then Rax, then Vin. Each cub leaned into his touch, accepting his authority. But they didn't move away from Hana. They stayed pressed against her, their message clear. We are here. We choose here. I have lived 140 years, Tor said quietly. I have seen much in that time. I have seen my people spread across the stars, building colonies and alliances. I have seen wars and peace, triumph and tragedy. But I have never seen cubs bond with another species. I did not think it was possible. 1. He looked at Krelva. You acted against protocol. This is true. But you acted in accordance with something older than protocol. You listened to your cubs, and you trusted their judgment. This is also true. Tor turned back to the other elders. The cubs have spoken. They have chosen Hana as pack. And by our oldest laws, the laws that existed before we ever left our home world, cubs' acceptance of a pack member is sacred. To reject their choice would be to reject them. The silver-scaled elder nodded slowly. The pack bond is absolute. If the cubs have truly bonded with the human, then the human is pack. This has never happened before. But the law is clear. The third elder, who had been silent until now, spoke. And what of Krelva's violation? She still opened the den during an emergency. Tor was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, She opened the den to retrieve a pack member who was dying. Show me the law that forbids saving pack. No one spoke, because there was no such law. Pack came first. Always. Pack was everything. Then we are decided, Tor said. Krelva's actions were unorthodox, but they were not wrong. She will face no punishment. Instead, he paused, seeming to make a decision that surprised even himself. Instead, we will recognize what has happened here. We will name it and honor it. He placed one claw on Hana's shoulder. The weight was significant, but not crushing. It felt like a blessing. Hana of the humans, the cubs have claimed you, and we recognize this claim. From this moment forward, you are den blessed. You are pack to Tala, Rax, and Vin. You are family to Krelva. This has not been spoken in 12 generations, but it is spoken now. Hana felt tears in her eyes. She didn't try to hide them. I'm honored, she whispered. I'll protect them with my life. I promise. I know you will, Tor said. You already have. The formal hearing ended, but nobody moved immediately. There was a sense that something important had happened, something that would change things in ways they couldn't fully understand yet. Humans and Vreshka had worked together for years, but always with distance, always with caution. Now that distance had been crossed by 3 cubs and their small human pack member. Later that evening, Hana sat in the nursery with the cubs playing around her. Krelva sat nearby, watching with soft eyes. The tension that had always existed between them was gone. In its place was something new. Understanding, trust, family. They knew before I did, Krelva said suddenly. My cubs saw what you were before I could. They judged you correctly. They're smart, Hana said, laughing as Vin tried to steal her datapad again. They've always been smart. No, Krelva said. They're something better than smart. They're wise. They see clearly, because they don't have all the fears and prejudices that adults carry. When I locked you out, I was thinking like an adult. Like someone who has been taught to fear. But they were thinking like cubs. Like someone who only knows what they've experienced. And what have they experienced? Hana asked. Love. Krelva said simply. They've experienced your love. And they returned it. It really is. That simple. Reend. Love. 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 Tala climbed into Hana's lap, purring loudly. Rax pressed against her side. Vin dropped the datapad and joined the pile. Not wanting to be left out, 3 cubs and 1 human, tangled together in a warm heap. Hana stroked their scales and hummed the lullaby they loved. The one she had sung, even while dying in the cold. The one that had become theirs. What will happen now? Hana asked. Will other Vreshka accept this? Will they understand? Some will, Krelva said. Some won't. But it doesn't matter. The elders have spoken. You are Den Blessed. You are Pack. Anyone who challenges that, challenges the cubs themselves. And no one wants to face an angry Vreshka cub. She paused, then added with something that might have been humor. Especially 3 of them. Days turned into weeks. The blanket that had saved Hana's life was preserved in a special case in the ship's museum. It was torn in places, stained with cub saliva and human blood, and smelled faintly of both species. But it represented something unique. The first cross-species pack bond ever officially recognized. Other humans came to see it. Other Vreshka came too. Some left offerings beside the case. Small tokens. Notes. Toys for cubs. Flowers from Earth. Crystals from Vreshka homeworld. Day visited the museum one day and found Hana standing before the case, staring at the blanket. You're famous now, he said with a smile. The human who became Pack. I don't feel famous, Hana said. I just feel like someone who loves 3 very special cubs. That's exactly what makes you special, Day said. You didn't do any of this for recognition. You did it because it was right. Because they needed you. And you couldn't walk away. Hana smiled. They would have done the same for me. They did do the same for me. Back in the nursery, Tala was showing Rax and Vin her favorite game. It involved Hana's blanket, a new one, not the preserved one, and lots of running and jumping. Cubs played the game every night now. They called it the saving game. Though, of course, they didn't use words. They would pretend Hana was in danger. And they would rescue her with the blanket. Over and over. It was both play and practice. Both memory and preparation. If Hana ever needed saving again, they would be ready. And Hana, watching them play, knew that if they ever needed saving, she would be ready too. That was what Pack meant. That was what family meant. Not the same species. Not the same world. Not even the same type of mind or body. But the same heart. The same choice. To protect. The same willingness to drag a blanket through impossible spaces. To cross frozen corridors. To break ancient laws. All for the simple reason that someone you loved needed you. That night, Hana sang the lullaby again. The cubs settled down to sleep, warm and safe and happy. Krelva watched from the doorway, her fierce predator's heart, soft with love for all of them. And somewhere in the universe, perhaps other species would hear this story. Perhaps they would learn that family could cross any boundary. That Pack could include anyone brave enough to earn it. And that sometimes, the smallest gesture dragging a blanket toward a door could change everything.